This tutorial is for first grade, Module 1, Lesson 34. In this lesson, we're going to use a reckon rec to show what happens when we start with a set number of objects and we subtract that same number of objects. Then we're going to show how when we have a set number of objects and we subtract the number of objects that is one less than that set, how that always ends up giving us an answer of 1. So, for example, let's start with the problem 7 minus 7. To show that on the reckon rec, I'm going to push 7 beads from the right to the left. Ideally, we want the students to do this in one push, meaning we want them to recognize that they have 5 red beads, and to push 7 beads over, they would need 2 more beads. So we would like them to push the group of 5 and 2 more. If they can't do that, then at the least we would like them to start with the 5 beads and then add 6, 7, 2 more beads and push those over. Again, if they can do that in one push, that's the real goal. Okay, so our problem was 7 minus 7. All that means is I have 7 beads and I'm going to push 7 beads back over to the right. So we want them to see, okay, now we're just going to push all those beads back over to the right. The answer to my problem is how many beads I have remaining on the left-hand side. And obviously there are no beads remaining, so 7 minus 7 is 0. Now the next problem is 7 minus 6. So again, we'll start by pushing 7 beads over. And then we want to talk about the relationship between 7 and 6. Well, 7 and 6 are just one space apart on the number path or the number line. So that means that when I push 6 beads over, I should end up with 1 bead left. Now, to begin with, students might need to count out those 6 beads to come up with the answer, and that's okay at the start. So I'll just say I'm going to push 6 beads over. I can do it one at a time if needed. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This remaining bead tells me that 7 minus 6 equals 1. So again, we're going to look at that pattern of when you're subtracting two numbers that are right next to each other on the number line, you're going to end up with 1 as your final answer. Okay, now let's look at what happens when we subtract 10 minus 10. Again, students should know that the top row represents 10. So I'm going to push all of the beads over. There are my 10 beads. 10 minus 10 means I'm going to now subtract 10 beads. So now I'm going to push them all back. How many beads are remaining? 0. So 10 minus 10 is 0. From there, we'll go to 10 minus 9. So we'll start once again, pushing 10 beads over. Now I need to subtract 9 beads. Again, if the students need to count out the beads, at this point, it's still fine that they're doing that. So we'll count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's the 9 beads that I subtracted. I'm left with 1 bead. So 10 minus 9 equals 1. Now moving on, let's keep remembering that pattern. So let's look at 8 minus 7. I'm going to push 8 beads over. And so far, when I did 7 minus 6 and 10 minus 9, in both cases, those numbers were right next to each other on the number line, and I ended up with 1 bead left as my answer. Since 8 and 7 are right next to each other on the number line, let's see what happens if I just leave that 1 bead by itself. So without even counting these beads, I'm just going to leave 1 bead. And if I look what I pushed over a group of 4 and a group of 3, so that's 7. So I represented 8 minus 7. And I knew that my answer would be 1 because 8 and 7 are right next to each other on the number line. So again, it's okay if they start by counting back those numbers that they're subtracting, but what we really want them to notice is that pattern, that when the numbers are next to each other, you're going to end up with 1 for an answer when you subtract the two numbers.